All right. What's happening, guys? In DCL, I'm just gonna wait till you guys can hear me. I think there's a 10-second delay, but if you guys can hear me fine and you can see the video screen fine, can you just wave or say something in the chat to let me know? I'm gonna wait for it. I have a woo. Is it working? Is it screening? Okay, sweet. All right. Well, cool. You can hear me fine. All right, great. So some people can hear us. Awesome. Well, anyone that can't see or hear, if there's any glitches, just give it a refresh and we should be fine. Awesome. All right, so welcome to the DCL Core Conference. I think this is business conference number 7. We used to hold these pretty regularly in the past, took a bit of a break, and now we're coming back big. So obviously, some really familiar faces here, hopefully for you guys. We have an all-star lineup. We have Alex from Nuggets News. We have Jamie from Outlier Ventures. We have Ben from RedFox Labs. And the topic today, guys, is going to be accelerating the NFT space. But just quickly going to set some ground rules. So for the guys that can see us and hear us in DCL, there's so many of you guys here. But DCL, Decentraland is a very social friendly platform. You just need a link to join. So tweet this, take an image, take a video, put it on Twitter, your favorite bits. And during the event, what I normally do is I also go on Twitter. So it really grows the number of people coming in and tuning into these conferences. After it, it's going to be on YouTube anyway, so you can tune in if you missed the next half hour, if you missed the first hour, etc. So yeah, that's pretty much it. What we're going to do real quick is we're going to go through each person, a quick little intro, keeping it under a minute or two, just explaining how you got to the crypto space and how NFTs came to your radar and what you guys are doing. Alex, did you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. So I went down the crypto rabbit hole in 2012 and it was just Bitcoin. And then up until around 2015, I was a maximalist. And then I finally took the time to read about Ethereum. And I'm kind of glad I did because I missed out on the ICO being a maximalist, because back then all the threads would bash anything that wasn't Bitcoin. And then I think part of the Ethereum community and the beauty of it is that it's not just the one coin. And I think that has really helped the network effects. And you're starting to see that hit the sort of S curve of adoption when you look at the number of, dApps and teams and all that. And that sort of feeds into the NFT space. So it's kind of been DeFi and then there's overlap with NFTs. So I guess NFTs came on my radar a couple of years ago when I first heard about Decentraland. And now there's a lot of similar projects. But I think more recently, the way it's changed into other industries that I wouldn't have thought of at the time. So hearing about music and, streaming rights. So I think the whole notion of gaming and artwork, that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind. And people debate about whether or not that has any value. But I think what we're finding now is that the whole universe is just going to be so much bigger, and things that we haven't even imagined. So it's all pretty exciting, and every day you learn something new, which is the best part of all our jobs, I think.
Awesome. That's a deep rabbit hole. Looks like we're all still kind of falling into the crypto space as a whole, because it's like building this whole digital economy, and it's very broad, it's very big, and it's beyond anything we can even predict. Awesome, Alex. Thanks for the intro. Ben, did you want to go next, mate? What's happening in Vietnam and RedFox Labs?
Yeah, so Aussie based in Vietnam, had been a C-level expat for years, and traveling around and trying to send money home to Australia and back from Australia, needed a better way to send money without trying to pay these massive fees. So found my way into the same Bitcoin rabbit hole, started to research, started up a YouTube channel to help people like myself join and get into the scene, try to make it a little bit easier. Decided that I wanted to go across. I'd been working as a C-level for disruptive industries around the world and thought I need to get into this. So went across and ran a crypto project, then decided to start up a project that builds other projects. So we're in Southeast Asia in Vietnam, and had talked to Outlier, who's behind H1Z1 and some other big games, and decided that gaming and NFTs needed to collide in a big way because assets were lost or not transferable. So we sat down and started building out a remake of POGs, the 80s collectibles, and we call them COGs, keys to other games. And now we're using those across a number of different games, the NFTs, to unlock different levels and skins and characters and all the rest of it. So yes, so very exciting and fully immersed in the space.
Awesome. So we'll get on to like the vibe of Vietnam and Asia and the gaming and the NFT scene, which I'm sure is very deep and really exciting. Jamie from Outlier Ventures, did you want to jump in and let us know about what's happening?
Yeah, hey there. Thanks for having me on. So I set up Outlier Ventures in 2013. We were the first dedicated blockchain VC in Europe. And we've really evolved our business model with the market. So as I'm sure everybody else on the panel can attest, there weren't really many things to invest in as startups back then beyond Bitcoin and ETH. And so in the early days, we were an incubator focused on infrastructure. So we didn't do any investments at the application layer. We felt that there needed to be a lot more infrastructure in order that all these use cases could be possible. And obviously we're beginning to see that Web3 stack mature now. We always looked at blockchain not in isolation, but in combination with things like IoT and AI. So we actually looked at it as a new data economy. In 2016, 17, I think we published a paper called The Convergence Thesis, which was how these technologies converged and combined. And then as that Web3 stack has matured, we've now focused all that knowledge and learning and network as an accelerator, focused on the middleware and the application layer. So middleware making all this stuff usable to the 99% of developers, which is an often ignored form of adoption. Everyone thinks it happens with consumers. And then increasingly at the application layer in things like DeFi and NFTs. And more recently, our kind of latest evolved thesis, DeFi 2.0, looks at these things in combination. So both NFTs as a form of collateral in DeFi and leveraging that infrastructure that we've got for borrowing, lending, insuring. And then the flip side, NFTs leveraged in DeFi as a form of loyalty mechanism to kind of reduce this kind of very promiscuous behavior coming in from the yield mechanics.
Awesome. By the way, you guys can jump in if you want to say anything, or it's more of a conversation thing. So feel free to ask anyone anything in between. But Jamie, quickly, so you said in 2013 when you entered, you obviously had the idea, the vision to kind of push these things forward. I think everyone saw that, the blockchain, the industry is going to be big and it needs some sort of acceleration in certain structural levels. We're going to try to bring it into the NFT space now. So I've been kind of in a NFT bubble for the last 2 to 3 years, or I'd say in 2018, NFT was my life, right? And now it's kind of, well, it was mostly Decentraland, because back then it was more like land and collectibles. There wasn't much happening, but there was like a select few that seemed the most promising. So obviously land, CryptoKitties and like, projects like that were coming out. And now it's kind of broadened out, and obviously art has taken a big the limelight. So what do you see that needs to be done in the NFT space to kind of not just accelerate it, but give people more of an easy outlook as to what the NFT space does as a value proposition, and kind of take it to that level where it can be used as well by normal people? I just see mostly crypto people kind of doing the NFT thing. What do you think needs to happen to kind of take it to the next level?
That was to me, right?
Yeah, that was to you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I actually think that NFTs are, of course, they're very broad in use case. Basically anything that's non-fungible, which is pretty much everything in your life other than things like currency. But obviously in this context, we're kind of looking at it in its applications in the creative industries, gaming, art, media. And I think NFTs represent crypto's crossover moment, because the reality is most people were never going to go to an exchange, centralized or decentralized, and buy cryptocurrency. It's just not most people don't understand the concept of currency and why something like Bitcoin could be regarded as kind of sound money. So, and it's slightly kind of, removed from their day-to-day life. Whilst if you look at what's happening in the NFT space, naturally, a lot of these assets are highly visual, and they're kind of more normal, right? So a collectible, a piece of art, these things, things that most people understand. and they're kind of highly viral. So as they're shared in existing channels, existing platforms, communities like Instagram and others, I think it allows us to kind of catch the eye, the attention of existing billions of people, and then bring them in to begin to unravel and understand, what that they can own in and what is a blockchain and these kind of things. So I actually think that this is going to be what this represents in kind of combination, gaming, collectibles, art, is the first time where we're going to have true mainstream sustained adoption, attention. And as a consequence, I think what we saw in 2017 with ICO mania, which was just people getting involved in crowdfunding and speculation, I think we're going to see 3-4x that in next year, 2021. So for me, this kind of represents what we've been looking for in crypto and blockchain for ages, which is to abstract away all the technical complexity and this obsession about infrastructure and scaling, and allow for a series of killer apps for the average person to kind of get involved in.
Yeah, I mean, the art industry, to be honest, took me by surprise, because for me it was all about like the use case and utility, and then in 2019 at the end of that, and then obviously 2020, it's just like everything NFT related is almost art now. When I say NFTs in my Twitter, under my Twitter, all the comments or half the comments are like, oh, they're talking about wearable and art, when I haven't even said art. I was just talking about the NFT industry as a whole. So yeah, I definitely see us breaking into that mainstream, because we've had people come in, we've had big artists start to do something in the digital space, DJs come in, we've got Blau, RAC, verified people that have, lots of followers, and they're finding value in blockchain. And to me, that's just like, isn't that what we've all been kind of waiting for? Like, to have some sort of a use case on that layer. So Alex, you interviewed Ferocious, I think, maybe a month ago. And what was the reception there with like your audience? Because obviously before that, you talked about cryptocurrencies, and I think a lot of that was as opposed to like what can happen. And the whole vibe of the last 10 years on Bitcoin and crypto, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's all about speculating about what projects are going to do. It's never, I don't know if you have a solid product on the blockchain that can appeal to the masses. So now with Ferocious's interview, like what was the reception there, and what were your thoughts on the industry after you had that conversation?
Yeah, I definitely learned a few things of her, and she taught me a few things as well. So I just love the fact that like I was coming at it, and I failed art at school, like every grade. And, she kind of knew a little bit about crypto, but I was telling her things like, oh, did you know that you can do this? And it'll allow you to do that in future. And she was kind of blown away. So that's what I love, teaching people things that are kind of in their field. And just the fact that I think she kind of came from a pretty honest and humble background, and now she's making pretty good money, particularly for her age. She's killing it. So they're the sort of things that are a classic example of maybe not when we hear the story about how we're going to bank the unbanked in third world countries, but sort of in the middle, I guess, on that scale, someone that's young, come from the average background, and now they're doing really well, and that is not possible in the traditional space because of all the barriers to get into, to get recognized, then to get into the art world. Then how do you sell it? How can you get global eyeballs on your piece of artwork? So I think it all ties together. But something you've also spoken about recently, Matty, is things like Facebook and Twitter, and those sort of social media platforms might start to find their way into the world of the metaverse. So when we first spoke about the metaverse and we think about going into these virtual worlds, I think it's still compartmentalized for a lot of people. Whereas there's going to be more and more overlap, and it'll just be like, you won't even talk about being in the internet. It'll just be going into the digital world, and all your assets are sort of, attached to you in some way. So yeah, it's amazing when that's all going. And still it's just the artwork side of things, isn't it? So maybe it comes back to the naming of these assets, like we call them cryptos, and a lot of them aren't currencies. And then a lot of these aren't going to be like tokens at all, the way we conceptualize them and all that. So it just shows you how early on we are, and how sort of, I guess, rough around the edges a lot of this stuff is still. And we say it's a little bit easier because we're bringing people in with things they're familiar with, but it's still really hard to use MetaMask. It's still really hard to use Scatter or the Wax wallets and those sort of things if you know absolutely nothing. So we've got to get it as easy as downloading that app and clicking sign in, and that'll come.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, those are some hurdles that we all know they're going to be solved. But what was surprising to me, to be honest, was that people like Ferocious, obviously 17 years old, and her whole friend circle seemed to be young, right? They all seem to be young artists, and they figured out how to do this super rare stuff and use MetaMask, and they asked questions on what is Ethereum, and now they're holding Ethereum. I find Ferocious to be extremely smart, because when she was starting to make a lot of money, I messaged her and I was like, hey, be careful. You might get asked for, maybe someone managing you, and to save your money. Hopefully, you know what you're doing. And she was like, trust me, I'm not spending a single Ethereum. I don't trust anyone. I'm just managing it all myself. And I was like, wow, this 17-year-old is making art, earning her own currency, managing her own security and currency. And it is the decentralized dream is actually happening. And to me, it was like so crazy how quickly they picked it up, that I was like, wow, maybe it isn't that big of a barrier if there's enough of a need to get there. But obviously, bringing down those barriers is great, like bringing down those friction points. But I don't know. I just found it astonishing that artists that had no idea just came in and figured it all out.
I think naturally as human beings, we're kind of like hodlers and hunter-gatherers or whatever it is. But these days, you give a kid a bit of gold or a fiat money, and these days we're phasing out money, and there's savings is kind of a thing of the past, and everyone's used to these credit cards and pay laters. So when you start to give a young person a lot of ETH and they can see their balance growing, or they've got these assets that they can see that are very visual now in a wallet, I just think it kind of changes things, and it might teach kids about savings rather than the old Dolomite account we have in Australia. Maybe you start to save these different digital assets, and hey, if the interest rates that are currently available stay there, can you imagine being able to compound these DeFi rates like 10% a year if you start when you're 15 at her age? Like it's crazy what's available if you are sensible with your money.
Yeah, I mean, again, they're so young. I'm 17. You can imagine by the time they're 20, they're going to know exactly what the value proposition of tech is, how to invest, how to make art. That's just the start, and they're just learning at such a rapid rate. When I was 20, I think I just blew like 60K on stock, lost it all. So I had no clue what I was doing. But at least in this, they're learning a lot more about what's happening. Ben, you know probably most about what's happening in the Asian scene more than anyone. So we're all here in the West. Well, I'm personally in Australia, and I feel like, my Twitter account kind of appeals to people in the West. I don't know about the exact demographic, but for me, it's kind of like this world of art and land, and this is my NFT space. Is it the same in Asia? Like, do they know about the NFT space, or like what is happening there?
Yeah, I think it's the crypto space definitely, as traders. But going back to the previous points, if you think about what the internet did for bloggers, I'm not surprised that that art is the first real thing to explode of late in the NFT space, because the internet gave writers, instead of being columnists or publishers for magazines, it gave people a form of expression and a medium and an outlet and a way to make money. And the quickest things that are going to adopt or explode are when people say, I can do that and I can make money from that. So it doesn't surprise me at all. But the weird thing about it is the NFT space isn't probably as huge here as it has been in other parts of the world yet. It is growing rapidly, but the crypto scene has exploded, obviously, because people are trading, making money, and for areas that probably their annual average incomes aren't anywhere near as high as some of the Western world countries, you could have made life-changing money out of investing in the crypto. So now, as we're starting to creep into gaming, this is where it comes into Asia's backyard. Esports, gaming, all of this type of stuff is massive. And now people will be able to actually take their assets out of games, use them in other games. And that's exactly what we're trying to build, because we understand that people spend thousands of hours playing a game and working their way up in levels and getting skins. And developers can just turn around and say, we're no longer going to give you the opportunity to retain those items because we're going to shut the game down. So the whole idea of knowing that you've put time in as an investment and you can get something back from it, and that is worth something, and it is tradable and it is usable elsewhere, I think that that's quite an exciting concept. And when we're talking to people in Asia about this, I think they think it can't happen soon enough. And as we're coming into this, you know, we're all in the crypto world. We're talking about parties and champagne and yachts and all the rest of it. You hear all these people talking about Lambos and all the rest of it. The rest of the world's doing it tough, and these play to earn type of environments, and NFTs being a form of an income for people. This is going to blow up very, very quickly, and the quicker it gets into the gaming space and the quicker it emerges itself in the gaming space, you're going to see NFTs absolutely explode. So I think the next year, especially in Asia, is going to be massive for gaming, and it's also, you're going to see lots and lots more people start to go towards earning incomes and having jobs inside of games, like your Roblox. I think that the NFT side of things was the thing that was really missing, that convertible asset and that interoperable asset between the games and between the universes. So Asia is going to eat this up. I think Asia will be the I think it'll be the fastest growing region for NFTs, especially as soon as it gets into gaming.
Yeah, if I can just add, I interviewed Niskal Shetty, who's the CEO of Wazir X, so India's crypto exchange that partnered with Binance. And he was talking about how they've just got similar, you know, the demographics, and they've all got a mobile phone and they just love all this stuff. And like you're saying, an 8-10% interest rate is awesome for the guys with a negative yielding bond who are trying to look for yield elsewhere. But it's more awesome for the guy that's living off $2 a month, or sorry, $2 a day, you know, the low income. And a lot of projects are already starting to donate like a little chunk of all this DeFi capital to these other places. And it's the ultimate, you know, we talk about leveling the playing field, but previously all these countries have been so reliant on, you know, debt from the US or the IMF, and, you know, they put them under debt, and then once they default, they come in and take all their assets. Whereas now it's you've heard me joke about my digital milkshake theory, it's called, where, long story short, money's going to move over mobile phones instead of banks. And so now you're going to have a generation of hopefully millions of people, billion people, that have all got a couple of dollars at their fingertips by performing little tasks or playing little games, or one of their friends in their local suburb has created something that's really cool, and now they're all working or playing for them, and they're all getting that $2 because there's just so much capital and value circulating these markets, which just can't happen through the old financial system. So it's really important to, even though this isn't like really to do with Bitcoin and money in a lot of ways, it kind of is that underlying backbone that's going to propel the art and, you know, digital asset side of this as well.
I think to build on that, you know, you can almost look at, this is a new digital economy, and you can look at it on a spectrum, right? You have passive and active. And so passive is hodling. Maybe one extension from that is holding some art in your wallet, right? Still very passive. And then on the other end of the spectrum, as you say, you have play to earn, you know, people making a living from this. And of course, once they're making a living from this, the majority of their wealth is going to be digital rather than physical or fiat based. And so as soon as that happens, of course, they're going to be the first ones doing borrowing and lending, taking insurance out on NFTs as collateral. And so that end of the spectrum, which is going to be the most active, i.e. the most engaged with this digital economy, where there's going to be the highest proportion of their wealth, is going to be, I mean, I hate the word unbanked, but, you know, people in low income economies where a play to earn like Axes is, you know, an opportunity for an equivalent form of income in any other job that they could get, or, you know, younger generations who are already gaming and, you know, especially in the COVID world, probably unlikely to get a job, probably unlikely to ever have a full-time job in the next decade. And then there's something kind of in the middle, which is most interesting. And I think it's in the middle, both generationally and in terms of kind of this passive active, which is this social component. So I think increasingly, okay, you know, let's say I listen to a piece of music, well, I might participate and engage with that music in a new way. So I'm still kind of owning it as a collateral, piece of collateral, or as an asset, but I'm sharing it. And I think increasingly NFTs, be it multimedia forms of art or music, are going to be social currencies. They're going to be shared, they're going to be experienced in social environments, and that's going to bring this crossover from all these major social environments. So I think it's a really interesting spectrum, but the most interesting part is the active piece. And I totally agree with what Ben was saying. I imagine it's Asia, Southeast Asia, where we're going to see, you know, the kind of highest levels of adoption there.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing that you say about that is that if you look at the unbanked countries and Southeast Asia, for example, people are used to having mobile money. And in China, for example, if you go to China now, people laugh at money, at actual physical money. WeChat and WeCash have taken over the whole currency system, and the government was actually quite open to doing that. But when you actually see that people have started up, they're very entrepreneurial, like you say. A lot of people won't have full-time jobs. They do Facebook businesses. It's like a grey market to the Amazons and the Lazadas of the world. When people understand that they can take artwork in a digital form or gaming items and skins, and they can be the secondary market, they can be the middleman, they can be the trader of these items as well. It opens up all sorts of revenue streams and income streams. And we know it's happening because on Facebook, we've got those people that run those businesses saying, how can I get into the NFT space, or how can I make money out of this, or how can I convert this to a digital form? So people are already onto it here, and they're already trying to work out how to make that happen. And as I say, the gaming is just going to be the catalyst for this region for sure.
Yeah, no, lots of things happening, and I think you guys touched on Axie Infinity, which I wanted to say. Sorry, 1 second. Let me just mute this thing.
By the way, I just won my first Axie game today. I've been playing with my daughter.
Nice.
She's gone to bed. We lost like 8 games in a row. It was like the most depressing thing. I watched a few tutorials. She's in bed. We've won the first game, so I've recorded it. I feel like I'm winning.
Nice, man. What was your what was your feel of the game? Did you find it was like pretty fluid, right?
Oh, I'll be honest, like I got increasingly angry with it because my daughter's there. We're like losing every game back to back. I've no idea why. I didn't know the positioning. You know, I didn't know which one you put up front. But what's cool about it is it's the first time, aside from maybe walking around something like Decentraland or CryptoVoxels, which of course you got to be careful with the kids. You can walk into some places that are not child friendly. It's the first time she understands what I do, right? So you know, and that's really cool for me to be able to experience Web3 and crypto with my 7-year-old daughter for the first time.
Wow,
that's actually a big deal because so yeah, with Axie Infinity, I remember, and the reason why I'm just so like bullish on the game and its user base, and I don't know how this is going to reflect on the access token or the assets, whatever that is. That's obviously the crypto people. But in terms of the game, I've just always been following it for 2 to 3 years since inception, and I never bought any Axies or anything. I just watched it, and I saw it go from like hundreds of users from those tournaments, going to those tournaments, to now like thousands of people going and turning up to those tournaments. And people in Philippines, there's like people that have like massive esport teams from the Philippines, and they source them out from the Philippines, and they all earn money. The people in these countries, they earn money just playing Axie, full-time wages. And there was like that article that came out, I'm not sure if you read it, about how like Axie Infinity, or just the play to earn concept, was being realized in these Asian and these lower income areas, which is obviously a big deal. And like you said, Jamie, you know, it was the first time for you to, you know, your daughter or your family to see what you're doing. For me, it was this year as well with my wife, showing her like the art industry, and she was getting into it, and she was like trying to pick out things that we should buy, and she's like understanding what blockchain can do now. And I don't know if this was possible before the NFT space.
Totally agree. Yeah. I
mean,
that's why I said I think it's the crossover moment, right? It's for the first time people, probably in all of our circles, understand what the hell we do. And that's great. And we, you know, so that's a first for me.
So my wife doesn't get into crypto at all. So until there's like retail shopping and she can buy digital shoes and all that sort of stuff, then I'm not sure she's going to be too interested. But maybe that's coming.
Wearables are coming now, right? Yeah.
Wearables.
I've got a 9-year-old son, and he tells me all the time that he's going to get a job in a video game. And I said, "What are you going to be?" And he said, "A doctor." And I said, "Well, you got to go to university for that." And he goes, "Not in a game." He said, "These people are rich and they just like to go into the doctor's office and I can do whatever I like. And then he's the same. He's saying, when your game comes out, I'll test it for you and see if it's okay. And he said, what you don't understand, Dad, is that most people aren't going to go to work. They're going to work in online in a video game or one of these. So at 9 years old, these kids, especially in this Asian region, are already eyeing off what they're going to do inside of a game, or what they're going to build, or they understand the concept of Roblox having teams of 8 or 9 people, and they can win construction contracts and they can go and build stuff, and they've just got to find a team, and they can subcontract and pay these people. And when I sit there and talk to him, he comes up with ideas that are like, Arcleg is a great game designer and he's put together an amazing game. But my son's coming in at 9 years old and saying, we know this world better than anyone. We play Roblox. We use the Robux. We're fully familiar with all of this stuff, and they understand how the world works. Those worlds work as well as the adults do it. It's actually quite scary.
Yeah, I mean, I interviewed Sebastian of Sandbox, and it was the first time talking to him where he really brought home the idea of the financial literacy that these generations are going to have. Certainly I didn't get at school, and just understanding credit and borrowing and lending and interest rates. And that's also what really excites me, not just at a generational level, but also in the context of creative industries. Because if you can imagine, we're going to give all of this DeFi infrastructure, this money Lego, to the creative industries now, and they're going to totally experiment with new business models, distribution. I think it's almost guaranteed next year Kanye is going to do something crazy, because he's already trying to create legal templates to empower artists, and when he realizes that could be a smart contract, then it's game over, right? And so I'm really excited about the level of economic innovation that's going to happen within industries that have been pretty, static in terms of innovation for a while.
Mm-hmm. Well, we had Akon do that Acoin thing, and he's got like an arm that helps people in Africa and stuff like that. But I've been in chats with companies that are working with similar status artists that might be doing something in the NFT space, whether it be art or something. So there's definitely it's on so many people's radars now, because you can do more than cryptocurrency, which is traditionally just buy and sell and hope something comes into fruition. But now there's actual use cases that artists and stuff can bring to the table. But do you guys think, and so this kind of brings us next to the next the topic, but do you think currently the crowd that are in this NFT space, it comes from the old traditional cryptocurrency space, where it's like, I want to invest in this piece of art. Once I buy this art piece, I want to talk about the artist and get him popular, and kind of like, I don't want to call it pump and dumpy, but it's kind of bringing the traditional crypto mindset to the where the art space is, or where the game space is. And it all has a different sort of an effect. For example, in like Axie Infinity, you have people buying up all the Axie, like the Mystic Axies. You have in the digital land space, people buy up all the land, and suddenly you have a market that's the prices are heavily influenced by speculators that prices out the actual artists and creators that will do something amazing with it. So how do you see this intersection, this colliding, this pulling of forces kind of working together? Do you see an issue there, Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, so we have this conversation all the time, especially as we're now investing in more creative industry startups that are leveraging NFTs. And I think that the way that I explain it is, look, if you are creating a token and you're designing it as an incentive mechanism or a disincentive to coordinate this game effectively that you want to play out in an economic sense in your marketplace, you can't be too puritanical about that. So a lot of people, they say it's very binary. It's like, well, it's either for speculation or it's for this kind of very purist idea of encouraging a certain behavior. And the reality is it should be both, right? So that the fact is, if you have a decentralized token asset, there's going to be a secondary market. You can't control that secondary market. You can engage with it, and you can try to make sure that it functions in an orderly way. But ultimately, it's going to happen whether you want it to or not. That's just a byproduct of it being a decentralized asset. And so I think when you have especially a lot of artists come into this space who, aren't especially commercial, don't want to be especially commercial, beyond enabling themselves to kind of sustain. But they kind of forget the reality is, as soon as you create this thing, this digital asset, a market will form around it. And if it has any value, then that market is going to grow potentially beyond what many of them can imagine as possible. So yeah. I just think it's a reality. And, for me, the easiest way to explain it is, look, effectively, this is a market that is speculating upon the utilization. So if you say it's a utility token, for example, then the secondary market is just speculating on the utilization. So the thing that you're hoping happens. And that's a good thing, right? It's a market pricing, whether they think you're going to be successful or not. When it comes to art specifically, I'm probably guilty of bringing my venture-like approach to what I hope is NFT digital fine art. I'm looking to find artists that I believe have that potential. And leverage network and signaling effect to help bring a premium. I think there, of course, there are going to be subsets of the creative industry that are going to be adverse to this stuff, but effectively we're looking at the financialization of everything. That is the minute that you apply these kind of atomic units of value into systems, you're financializing it, and that's just the reality of the world we're in. I think the outcome is net positive.
Yeah, I read something interesting the other day, just talking about how like the pure cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin is all about decentralization and the number of people using it. Whereas you go to like the individual people that are making their own token for themselves or NFT, and it's more of like a microcosm and a concentration of believers or small communities that place value on something. So it's kind of different ends of the spectrum, because we kind of, everyone wanted tokens in 2017, and then everyone hated tokens, and then now everyone's sort of demanding NFT tokens, and people are also interested in these other flavors of tokens. Like, I still don't understand why there's so many people putting out their own personal token and how that's not seen as a security by regulators. Like, how else does that accrue value? But people are speculating, and some of them have got like market caps in the tens of millions of dollars. So interesting.
Yeah. No, it's crazy because, again, like, you can do whatever you want, right? You got the smart contract, but like legally how this all ties in, who knows?
Well, just to build on that, because I mean, we have an in-house lawyer. Legal advice is a big part of what we do in the accelerator. So we've always had, for the last at least 5 years, an in-house securities lawyer. And the interesting thing about NFTs, depending upon how they're marketed, promoted, are probably the first time that we will have assets that might generally not be securities, where previously everything else was effectively a form of crowdfunding. Now, there are parts of, say, DeFi, where you have governance rights and a right to yield or income. That sounds a lot like equity to me, and very likely will be treated as such by the SEC or a securities regulator in different jurisdictions. But on the other end of the spectrum, a collectible is never going to be a security. A piece of art is never going to be a security. It's an alternative asset. These things are traded freely. It's a long established marketplace. And so actually, I think for the first time, most of the things that will be now under the crypto umbrella, assuming that they haven't been sold with the expectation of profit, are likely not to be securities. And a really interesting bit of news that's coming out in the US, the chairman, Clayton, is on his way out. I actually accidentally broke that news about a month ago because somebody told me, and I thought I found a piece of news about it. And apparently Hester Pierce is going to be the one that's replacing him as an interim chair, who is like crypto mom. So I think we're going to see, hopefully, a bit of a renaissance in the US, where previously Clayton was incredibly adverse to anything crypto related, even if it had demonstrable utility. So I think that the sands are shifting there.
Just a one-liner on that. talking about the people creating their own stuff and the ability to do that, my dad always used to talk about mechanics and cars, and he always used to say there's kit cars and there's factories. There's not a lot of kit cars that you can name that were do-it-yourself builds that ended up being magnificent, but there are a few really good ones like your Bolwells. But ultimately, in the longer term, people work out how to industrialize and commercialize these forms and these industries. So I think you'll see the big players also come into this space. And once the actual big games like Epic, these big EA Sports and all of these big gaming companies realize, hang on a second, NFTs do work in games, and you're going to get the big companies will make the spotlight. Those guys will jump in, and when they do, it's kind of like your Kanye moment that you were talking about before, Jamie, where these guys work out, hang on a second, this does actually work. And we know full well, because we talked to some of the AAA game developers, that they're already looking. But you never, as a business to be successful and already up and running, want to bring in temperamental technology that could topple or change your market. So it's extremely important to make sure these things are robust, tested, they have the security behind them before you bring them into big business. But that will just give the little guys that are building a name for themselves now even more spotlight once the big guys get involved. So it's a pretty exciting time.
Yeah, it'll be like the tail wagging the dog with the banking system and PayPal and Jamie Dimon that were, laughing at all this stuff a few years ago. And I hope you get to the point where independent, game creators are building stuff that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to, that's funded by a community, that's spread all over the globe. And then all of a sudden you see that, Bethesda is, partnering up with RedFox Labs, or, I hope it goes the other way around, where they're forced to come into that ecosystem, which would be the ideal scenario.
It's a race.
Yeah, it's just going to take like one big game company to, make a ton of money in this space, and then suddenly they'll all pay attention. But because of the decentralization of the space, it's interesting how, KuCoin recently announced that they're going to be accepting withdrawals and deposits of NFTs using Dago Finance as the first project that they're going to be doing. I haven't looked into Dago Finance. I have no idea how it works. But it just made me think like, all right, they obviously want some of the trade fees volume that's happening, because, there's a lot of volume happening here. But what's it going to mean if they suddenly, push out these NFTs to basically all speculators that will buy them and sell them and not really do anything with them? So it's kind of like when this big money comes to this NFT space, you can own it, of course, you can speculate on it, and there's no real separation of the two. And so it kind of has like this effect. It kind of like, a lot of these NFT projects have business models based around obtaining fees. And so they're all focused on pushing the game, pushing the economy, and then obtaining the fees from that. And so because anyone can do anything with it, if these big exchanges kind of build some sort of trade avenue on their platforms and take that fees away, I wonder what's going to happen.
I mean, I think the interesting thing about that, coming back to the passive and active, so like I would love to speculate on axes, but there's just no point, right? Unless you're deep playing that game, you just can't understand the asset. So the best exposure I could get is through an index holding them, or potentially investing in a gaming farm, right? And they've just got, or an esports team, and we're actually just today said we're going to back an Axie esports team. So I think on this, passive and active spectrum, I think that's again, the good thing about NFTs is increasingly they're becoming active assets. Like you have to be doing something, you have to be participating, their rewards, their loyalty mechanisms, and the gamification is getting more complex. And so unlike cryptocurrency, where you could just speculate based on something going up or down, I think the level of complexity to the asset in NFTs will create a barrier, and I think will, as a consequence, lead to lower liquidity and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think the biggest barrier to enter this space is just like, especially from people that are coming into it now, whether they be coming from like a VC, kind of a broader investment position, they're kind of like, all right, well, one, how do we even research into this? Where's the data? And two, when we do the research, like they probably figure out how deep it is. Maybe art they can figure out. But if you want to get into something like Axie Infinity, you got to understand the strategy, the game, the assets, the separation of which ones are investable, which ones are not. it is so deep, and the dynamic keeps changing. Now there's land, there's going to be items, there's all these things. Even with Decentraland, I mean, all you have is a pixel map. You don't know where anyone's located. It's usually been me putting out these weekly like videos on where what's located, but well, that's got people investing or looking deeper. So there's all these structural issues, and not just that. It's a lot deeper than having just like a coin market cap for NFTs. Each project is just so deep that you, like you said, the only way that a broader firm can get exposure is probably to invest in another firm that's doing it on a deeper level. So
you've got to be careful though, because if these just on the exchanges, it's cool that they're offering the exposure to the NFTs and all the rest of it. But as you said, the reason for that is because they're having the trashier exchanges are having their worlds eaten. Sorry to talk about the elephant in the room, but they're having their worlds eaten by decentralized exchanges like a Uniswaps and all the rest of it. And if they're prepared to push the narrative of this is the next hot NFT, you could end up being flooded with a whole lot of low quality NFTs as well, which actually sets the space back a little bit. So I think we've just got to be mindful of the fact that it's awesome that they're getting exposure, and it's awesome that they're being traded on regular exchanges and that they become supposedly more accessible. But as Jamie was talking about before, regular people are not just going to go onto an exchange and buy Bitcoin and all the rest of it. So I see this more as being not a step towards adoption. I see it more as a desperate attempt from some of these places to keep the doors open and the lights on until things turn around. So I think we just got to be very careful that it doesn't set the space back a little bit.
100% agreed. I agree with you. One of the coolest things this year was just like the whole growth of Uniswap and kind of, big projects like Binance kind of chasing these DeFi coins and listing them ASAP, trying to get in, and probably not being paid for it at all. But they wanted a part of that action. I actually don't like the whole NFT, these exchanges kind of eating up or taking some of that NFTs on their exchanges, because like you said, NFTs is kind of the buzzword right now. And if they just start to say, hey, we've got these NFTs you can invest in, I'm sure people just throw their money at them to kind of see, to get some sort of exposure, but they don't know what they're buying. So
it's all right if they're quality.
Well, that's where the public will just be overwhelmed. Like literally anyone can create these, and people are, and influencers are already. And that's where it's just, there's going to be millions of these things, and there's no how do you categorize them. Like, even if you had a coin market cap, where on earth do you even start? So I think it's whoever sort of silos all that information in an easy to read way for people. But yeah, it's going to be overwhelming, I think.
I don't think you can kind of silo that information as a whole industry. I think like on a market cap level, maybe, but I think all of these projects are going to have like individual, community made data websites and very in-depth kind of like, strategy, skill, how to invest, like all these information and all that stuff. But most of these have like 4 or 5 community websites, or the big ones do, that go through all these by themselves. And to have like something that skims the top of all of these that are probably going to be in the thousands of NFT projects in the future, I don't think it's possible. Maybe like a snapshot view of the whole industry, but yeah, nothing coin market cap like.
And I'm trying to really think through this at the moment, and I don't have the answer, but the only way I can think that you can build real secondary markets around NFTs beyond the really active participants themselves, like earning and trading, is either if you fractionalize the ownership of the high value assets. So I believe, and again, I don't fully understand it, but in Axes, there are things that aren't that good for in-game, but that are valuable because they were there at Genesis. So they're kind of more of a collectible than something you would use in game. And so these things become prohibitively high. They become like blue chip NFTs, and therefore people might just want you fractionalize ownership of them. The other way is through DAOs and guilds, or guilds as DAOs, and those having tokens, governance tokens to vaults. Again, from a kind of active group of people that are maybe playing, earning, managing, like a subset. And then above that, so you kind of have fractionalization, you have relatively small to medium-sized guilds, and then maybe above that you might have indices. And so, for example, the way that I look at Whale is as an indice just on an index on NFTs, full stop. And I don't want to endorse them, but I like the idea of exposure to things that I'm never going to be able to collect, either because I'm coming in too late, or they're too complex, for me to kind of trade. And so I think it feels like there'll be the kind of three levels that somebody that's not active can participate in the asset class.
That's exactly what me and Matty have been talking about recently. Like a need for an ETF, an NFT ETF for people that just say, I want exposure to this narrative.
Yep.
Yeah.
Actually, we've been talking to some people in the industry about building this, and I think it's closer than people think, the capabilities and possibilities to doing that. But Jamie's right, and what Alex is saying is right. I think having exposure to it without fully understanding it, and there's a lot of things that can be done with synthetics as well, that give you the ability to have that exposure. So yeah, we'll talk more about that in the coming months, but people are getting closer to being able to deliver that.
100%. All right, guys. So we've talked 50 minutes. I'm just going to ask one last question, and then we'll probably end it there. But Alex, what are you most bullish about in the NFT space?
To be honest, I'm probably like the one that is learning off you guys to be able to say like one thing. So
what's kind of been on your radar? Like, when you think NFTs, what is it that just kind of the majority share of?
I know people say that, your Decentraland is your favorite and whatnot, and it's one of my favorites as well. But I just think whoever gets it right and has a lot of the people setting up shop there is going to get a lot of network effects, and that's probably going to be hard to replicate. But it's just so early on that, like, at the moment, my approach is to put a bit of investment into the top sort of 10-ish gaming projects, and I don't know the answer to what is the most bullish thing, but I know that it's going to change the world of investing, collecting, just because we've already seen what it's done for people like Fiocious and the gamers and all that. It's going to happen. It's just in slow motion.
All right. So Alex thinks Decentraland. Jamie, you? No, I'm kidding.
It's such a tough question, right? I mean, the thing that interests me, so I don't want to say like where the most value is going to accrue, but like directionally, the thing that really interests me is NFTs, moving away from these NFTs as passive things that you just have in a wallet that you can't really share and experience. Okay, there's some like very crude galleries, but it's still like pretty basic. To context specific digital consumables. So the idea that so it could be a wearable, for example. So I have an avatar, I can buy an NFT, it can be an investment, but it can be something that I can wear, I can consume in a virtual environment. And so that for me is the most exciting thing, because very quickly it goes from just something I kind of have bought to speculate upon and put in a wallet to something that can begin to be part of my identity, my social experience. I think that's where you're going to see a lot of value accrue. I think that's where you're going to see brands quickly jump into to kind of be a part of that game. Yeah.
No, Alex, I agree with you, man. Like, the network effect is going to be the thing that separates these projects, and whoever can take that lead first, whether it's, I think it could be like an intersect between all of these metaverse projects like CryptoVoxels and Decentraland, because they all have NFTs that the other one can give value to and bring as part of their platform. So if we can kind of have that shared thing, then I kind of see it being like this whole like multiple projects that contribute to them all succeeding. It's kind of, where do people hang out in the masses? Where do the shops want to set up, and how are those accessible? Ben, what do you think is, not so much the project, even just the industry? What industry do you think is going to, kind of?
I think honestly, we haven't even touched the surface of the interoperable NFTs across games. The ability to, I mean, think about it. The crudest analogy I can think of is, think about it that everyone's got a radio. Think about it as people now have CD players, and we've got the first CD. We've got something that's portable, and we can actually take it from one player to another player to another player. The idea of being able to pick up a gun or earn a gun and take that from World of Warcraft into CSGO across games and across platforms, I think that's extremely exciting to know that the hard work that you've put in, it won't happen like that straight away. It'll be transferable, or you'll be able to trade or swap But the fact that people can actually take things from one game to another game and have actual utility value, and potentially unlock special powers or level ups and things like that, that's what I think will be the first real catalyst for the utility value of the NFTs.
I think that was Engine's whole premise, right? To have like these AAA style games kind of pop up and have Engine or NFT assets that you can use across games. And that was happening, but obviously the space was quite small that understood how that worked. And totally agree with you. Interoperability is just like a huge deal in this space. Might take some time for these projects to mature so they can focus on interoping. But yeah, it's going to be the thing that people realize that there is value on like the self-management of these NFTs and taking your NFT to one project. It's a sword, and then even like the Genesis cat, like the zero first ever crypto kitty that was ever sold. I think the current bid on it is like 250 ETH, and it's probably worth a ton of money. But as these projects develop and they give value to this Genesis cat, maybe they will say, hey, if you have the crypto kitties, the first 100 of them, then you can bring them in and you have the most exciting sword. So suddenly they have value, and maybe there'll be this compounding value where these early NFTs of these projects, because it makes sense for these projects when they come out to onboard these communities by giving value to those tokens. It's an easy onboarding. So yeah, I think interoperability will take center stage, maybe 2 years from now, maybe a year or two from now, when a lot of these take a maturity. But yeah. All right, cool. We're going to end it here, guys. Thank you for coming. Thanks in DCL for tuning in. A lot of people here, and we have some questions, but maybe we can ask them in the YouTube comments, and I'll try and answer it there. But this is going to be on YouTube, and we're going to keep doing these conferences. I'll try and aim for one a week, bringing in like people that are in the NFT space and having a discussion going on. And yeah, let's see what we can take from this. Thanks for joining, everyone, and our panelists. Thank you all for coming in.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Matty.
you.
Nice to
Thanks
meet
for
you.
having us. Thank
Talk
you.
soon.
Awesome.
See you.
See you guys.